Hello and welcome to the 11FS Spotlight Show. My name is David Brear. In this weekly show, we shine a bit of a spotlight on the best and the brightest in the tech and financial services industry to try and understand what is it that gets them going, growing, and what they think the future of the industry will look like. On today's Spotlight, I'm delighted to be joined by Brian Radin, who is the president at Comdata Prepaid and Payroll Cards. Thank you very much for joining us, Brian. How are you doing today?
Thanks, David. Appreciate you having me on Spotlight.
No worries at all. On today's show, what we're going to be doing is talking a little bit about Brian's career and Fintus, as well as the bigger picture on how revolutionising payrolls and everything that comes with that is really shaping how the industry is really sort of operating. I guess before we start off, it'd be good to talk a little bit about your background. Maybe if we start with that, Brian, and understand a little bit about your career. But maybe if we talk a little bit about your role at Fintus. Do you want to start us off with that?
Sure, absolutely. I'm the president of Comdata, which is a subsidiary of FleetCor. FleetCor is a public payments business with about a $22 billion market cap. And Comdata was acquired by FleetCor several years ago. Within it is a prepaid pay card business, and Fintus is the brand that we created and launched about 2 years ago.
Very good. I guess starting a little bit back then with your, we'll sort of come back to Fintus and actually the impact. I mean, prepaid cards are having an amazing impact on the industry globally in terms of how people are interacting with finances, but actually how organizations are getting to market with new and interesting propositions as well. So, but we'll come back to that bit as we go. Sure. What sort of got you to here? Our viewers, our listeners are always really fascinated about how did people get to their roles and what sort of led them to the career that they've had. So tell us a little bit more about you. What got you to this point in your career?
So you've hit my favorite topic, David. No, and I don't think we have enough time to go through the various things that I've done and changes I've had. But I really started my career in a totally different way in the cable industry in the United States, and spent quite a bit of time doing that and thought I'd be in communications. And then after an MBA at Wharton, I realized I had an interest in the human capital space and really the intersection of human capital and payments, and ended up at ADP in strategy and acquisitions. Caught the entrepreneurial bug, started 3 different kinds of businesses related to payments and human capital. And then when I was running a global payroll software company, the CEO of FleetCor, who I actually worked for early in my career at ADP, had approached me about coming in and looking at the prepaid business at Comdata to take a look at how we should go forwards with that business, or how FleetCor should. It seemed very intriguing. I liked the space, and I took him up on that in early 2018.
Very cool. And actually, I mean, that history and that background in the cable industry, there are lots of laterals we're seeing into financial services right now in terms of the competitive market changing and almost the bifurcation between people being some providers being commoditized and some really sort of pushing for increasingly experiential service differentiation in the market. So you've sort of seen this movie a little bit before what's playing out in FS right now, hey?
Yeah, I mean, I think in every industry I've been around, and there's been some others in between. As I said, it wasn't a straight line from getting out of college and ending up in this role. There was a lot of movement on both sides of the street. But I think in every one of these industries, there's some consolidation, there's some level of disruption, and there's some level of competitiveness that over time is either driven by consumer demand, regulatory changes, or just smarter people running better businesses. I mean, human capital is an incredibly important part of how companies are successful or fail. I've seen it in my own startups. I've seen it at big companies. And it's probably undervalued a bit, and probably some of our conversation today will get into the things that we do for our clients, but most importantly for their employees and our cardholders. And I think it's important to keep that in mind as we address the marketplace who we're talking to and how important they are to the success of these businesses.
Definitely, yeah. Whether it's a product business or a services business or whatever, it's all people underneath that, isn't it? And they sort of make everything happen. And we'll definitely touch on that more. One of the other things that you do as well, I mean, you're an advisor at Runway Venture Partners. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? I can really see how, given what you've done and, pattern recognition of being able to, having been an entrepreneur and being an entrepreneur and seeing businesses succeed, it can help you spot other people who are kind of trying to make impact as well, hey?
Yeah, I mean, when you go to work for a $22 billion market cap company, after you would just sit in your apartment and dream about, $10 million when you're starting some of these companies that I've done, it's one of those things where I always want to keep my hand close to what others are doing. One, because it's exciting, it's interesting. I probably secretly would like to do that again. And two, I learn a lot because I can see what's coming up the pike and see what might be affecting my business. And three, I appreciated the people that shared their experiences with me when I was trying to do things on my own and took that to heart and try to do that and pay it forwards. Runway is a early stage venture investment firm that focuses not on seed capital, but on businesses that have a more refined model, but are still being thought of kind of as seed-based valuations, which we think creates some additional value opportunity for the investors. And I typically am involved with opportunities that are in payments and human capital technology, and get brought in or try to help with the businesses that we've invested in. And it does keep me close. I'm on the board of a couple of other early stage companies and have been on others in the past. It's just a matter of time and commitment to what I do day to day, but I enjoy doing it quite a bit.
It's always an interesting challenge, that, isn't it? When you your time is the limited, most limited resource that you really sort of have in the day, don't you? And when you're building businesses and running businesses and helping other people with their businesses, I mean, do you find that it's almost I've found personally, doing non-executive director roles and different things in that mix, it's almost it's nice to think about somebody else's problems for a little while and help them focus with your experience. Is that how you see it as well?
I think there's definitely an element of that. If you give some guidance and they fail, it's not directly your fault, so that's always good. But I do think for me, it's probably more just the intellectual challenge to see if I can help solve another problem. I've got plenty. Our business is challenging, and there's, as you said, lots of competition, lots of changes, lots of regulations. So it's not easy. It's exciting. It's fun. I enjoy working with the people that I've hired and the people in our organization. But when I step back and I'm talking to an entrepreneur who is looking at different things, different issues. I mean, for me, I had some pretty good venture capital firms investing in some of my businesses, and sitting at a board meeting with those guys is very different than sitting with the CEO of FleetCor. Both have the same objective in mind, to exceed the targets that have been established for the business. But when you're running a company where you're burning cash at $100,000 a month, and by the end of 14 months you've got no money, it's a different situation than when you've got $800 or $900 million of cash on your balance sheet, even though you're competing with other businesses to get a share of that. So it's a little different. I also just think that in the end, that's where great ideas come from. Frankly, working in Silicon Valley with one of my startups, there was a lot of challenges and a lot of conversation that the small business, the entrepreneur, the startups, that's where all the great ideas come from. And I do think that's where more ideas come from. But I'm also not down on big companies. I think they can pretty nicely take ideas and commercialize them and turn them into real businesses, where a lot of startups fail because they just either don't have capital, they don't have, let's say, the right human capital at the time. So I learned a little bit from doing those. I learned a little bit from what I do today and working even at ADP years ago. And that I try to merge both of them and see if I can be the best kind of manager that I can. We'll see if You have to ask others how successful I've been, frankly.
Well, it makes it an interesting challenge, doesn't it? But well, maybe if you want to tell us a little bit more about Fintus, then. So you guys are working to revolutionise payrolls. I mean, payroll is quite an archaic. Again, it's one of those things that people think it's just done and it just happens and it's a process, but it just doesn't happen, does it? And particularly in different markets, it operates in a very different way. So tell us a little bit more about what you're aiming to do with Fintus then, and actually how you guys are differentiating.
Yeah, I would say, look, payroll, and I've been around this space domestically and globally. As I said, I ran a global payroll company that we did quite a bit of payments as well within the business. Obviously, being at ADP, probably the global leader in payroll, and then the payments business here, which tags on to the payroll process. I've had probably a 360-degree view of it. I think with Fintus, we see ourselves as kind of the anti-bank. Our platform really allows employees, and especially those employees that are more underbanked, the community that, frankly, a lot of people are trying to get their arms around, both to help and in some ways to probably get more money out of. And so it's where we're trying to focus in a positive way by giving them a financial platform that allows them to manage their money more effectively, provide better education, better tools, without having to sign up for a bank account, without getting minimum fees, without probably getting upsold on a mortgage or on a credit card or other products that frankly you don't need. I think the other part of payroll is people think of payroll as simply, as you said, it's a process, it gets done. But it's pretty important if you think about it. It's probably the most important thing to every employee in a company. It's how I get paid. So I think part of it is the historical view, which is get it done right and get it done on time. And if you can't do that, you probably shouldn't be in the business. But the other side of it is how do you deliver it? How do you make it more value add? And I think that's becoming more important both for the enterprise, who incurs a significant cost in processing it and has the onus of making sure it's done right, but also in the environment we're in today, being able to offer better products and better solutions to their employees, particularly in this, we hope, post-COVID world, that a product like ours, a platform that they can use, is simpler, it's more robust, and it allows those people, as I said, particularly those that are more underbanked, to have something that maybe they wouldn't have or wouldn't have had in the past. By giving the employers a better way to deliver that, they can cut their costs. They're not producing checks. There's a lot of cost to that in America today. Still about 10% of the paid employees, W-2s we say, are getting a physical paycheck, which is unfathomable in some ways. It's even higher in the accounts payable side, which is a sister division we have. And during the pandemic, we did see a lot of companies struggling to get those checks into the hands of employees because they're not working in an office. And typically a lot of those people getting physical checks are working in a manufacturing plant or an office. And a lot of companies couldn't pay their employees, and that was very disruptive. And so they started to think more important that delivering electronically was more important. And then with this whole challenge of hiring, rehiring, attracting, what else can we do to turn something that may be plain vanilla that could be an advantage for us against our competitors, and also something that our employees would appreciate to get them to come back to work? And that's where we think our platform comes in.
It's interesting. I mean, at 11FS, we talk a lot to people about, the difference between digitized and digital. And actually, I mean, we've seen a digitized paper-based bank statement and it's, internet banking. It looks the same. We've got digitized insurance, which is, it's still an annual policy, not because that makes sense in a digital world, but because actually that's just the way it's always been done. So, as you say, the sort of advancements of standing back from the problem and thinking about, today's problem with today's solutions, then actually you sort of get to a very different place, don't you? And that's what you guys have done with, you've got a solution, the earned wage access, so the EWA. How does that look to address this? Because obviously you can start to tap in a little bit more frequently if you start to think about payroll and start to think about the money that's earned in a different way, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, again, this goes back to the construct that you alluded to. I mean, payroll software. I mean, listen, when I started my company, I didn't need ADP or Paychex or anybody else. There was two of us. I could figure out the payroll myself, and then I could use Intuit or something. And there's many small payroll platforms that have emerged in the last 5-7 years that are probably, from a technology perspective, ahead. And there's some guys doing it better. But most payroll systems were created with an idea of time. You work a period of time, and then I pay you in a certain period of time. So whether it's weekly, biweekly, semi-monthly, monthly, etc. And I think that's where the world has changed, in that even before the pandemic, people were workers, particularly hourly workers who were living paycheck to paycheck. Something like half of the American workforce lives paycheck to paycheck, doesn't even have $400 of savings. I mean, these are pretty common statistics. Gartner, your former employer, has done a lot in this space. And so how do you help people pay the bill on Tuesday if they don't get paid till Friday? And it's one of those things where if your systems don't allow you to do it, your answer is plan better. But that's just not a reality. And so earned wage access, or the concept, is literally the premise that, hey, if I work 3 days within a pay period and I want my money because I need it, hopefully I need it for something important, not to get some smokes or something along those lines, but can I get it? And up until the concept of these earned wage access platforms were created, you couldn't. It was just, or you could get an advance. A lot of employers don't like to give advances. You could get a very expensive loan, payday loans, which are frowned upon by regulators at the state and federal level. Or you could take a legitimate loan, and obviously you have the obligations of paying that back. So this whole notion of pay me when as I work was really the premise. And so we launched our platform with the concept of, look, you can work 5 hours, 10 hours within a pay period. If you want the money, you can get the money if you need it. And we have some governors around it. You can't take 100% of it and things like that, because we don't want people to take all of their money every day. But philosophically, that's more of our opinion, or maybe a governor we put on the business. But in reality, there are platforms that allow you to take every single day all of your funds. I'm not sure, again, whether I think that's right. But in some degree, what's right's in the eye of the user, I guess. And so for us, at least for now, we have some limitations, but the idea would be over time, if you want to take all of your money, as long as you've earned it, we will work with your employer, and we will provide that to you at the time you need it.
It's fascinating because we talk a lot about the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed, right? We talk about private banker for the mass market, and the digital providing the opportunities for people to be sort of better off, because we're sort of, people are democratizing those things. I mean, arguably, this is taking almost invoice financing to everyday people, and that's an amazing thing, isn't it? Because you know what people are going to be paid, you know the work that they've done, and actually being able to accelerate that to get the money to them quicker, that ultimately, like say, helps them manage their day-to-day cash flow. It's a great thing. What do you think the full-on impact of this has been then in a pandemic world, as you say, because almost the emperor's new clothes a little bit in terms of where manual processes fall down, and like say physical checks and different things that go on there. Do you think that will have almost dramatically accelerated people towards these types of solutions, just because their employees will be demanding this type of thing even more?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter, in the sense of the world. I've been around, I'll step back, I've been around human capital a long time, as I alluded to earlier, and that employers often think about employees in a way where they have the upper hand. Well, the world has changed. And if companies don't think about, particularly larger businesses, but it goes down to the guy who's got the corner cafe. If you don't think about the way in which you hire, reward, attract your labor force today, you're going to fail. I mean, you probably had a little shorter lifetime than I've had, but in my lifetime anyways, I haven't ever seen what has occurred in this workplace because of COVID. Even the 08 financial crisis or going back into the 70s crisis, 80s, none of them displaced workers in the same way. And as we've coming on the other end of it, this balance between employer and employee, which was always a bit of a tug, the balance has shifted to the employee. And as an employer, you have to think about, how do I reevaluate my role as an employer so that I can be competitive? And if you don't think about the way in which you talk to the workforce, attract the workforce, incent the workforce, particularly in the fact that people still are not coming back to work at any great pace, particularly in the industries that use our products, whether it's hospitality, whether it's in some manufacturing, staffing. Yes, people are going back to work, but whether it's unemployment benefits here in the United States that are still being provided, whether it's fears of COVID lingering, which are probably very real in some places, whether it's people just decided to get a different job. I don't need to be paid $8 an hour to work in a restaurant in Birmingham, Alabama. I can make $14 in an office in the same community, and I can then work from home. So a lot of things have changed, and I see a lot of companies struggling with it. And I think the worst thing you can do is not communicate with your employees as to what is your strategy, whatever it is, whether you're saying back to work every day and we're not raising minimum wage, or it's the same work hours. You've got to do it, because people go to the work. Their fears are the worst. Like, my fear is that, you'll say my name wrong or cut me off or do something, right? So I go right to the worst if you don't say anything. And I think that's what happens in the workplace. Something like the Fintus on-demand solution is a tool. It's a tool to say to this workforce that is disrupted, look, we want you back. Here's a way to make your job with us better. It's not the only thing. I think paying people more, a higher wage is very important. I think giving them flexibility, although I don't know how you can work from home and serve a table, but I do think that there needs to be more flexibility around hours and how people work and where they work. And I think there's other benefits that need to be delivered to incent that workforce to come back to work. Ours is one of those tools that says, look, we understand the day-to-day necessities, and we're willing to provide you a tool to get that money you need to pay someone to watch your kids when you come back to work, or to pay the utility bill or your rent, and not wait till the end of the month and be under that financial stress or financial hardship, which really does cause lack of productivity in the workforce. It creates people's fears, or stirs up their fears, they said, and then gets them thinking about another job again. So you've got to get your arms around this as an employer. It's something I think about quite a bit for our own team, our own organization, but I see quite a bit of it around me, and it's broader than payments, it's broader than pay cards, but it's really an important topic, I think, in business right now.
Yeah, and as you say, it's rare that actually it's so indiscriminately impacting every industry and every different type of business within those industries. As you say,
Absolutely.
The financial crisis was really seen as a banking problem touching everybody else, but this is everybody, isn't it? And I do agree with you. I think the sort of rule book for culture within companies is being really disrupted, and because everybody, whether if you're JP Morgan Chase and you're Jamie Dimon, doesn't matter. You're just a video on a screen these days, because that's what everybody is, and actually that's great in some places because it's so leveling in terms of communication and everything that goes with it. And in other instances, as you say, it's brilliant for remote workers who have always wanted to spend a bit more time with their families, but at the same time, it's incredibly isolating. And anything like this that you can do that creates a little bit more control for people to have that option, have that option to press that button and, get that money earlier because of a real need for it, particularly, as you say, the times that we're living in where people don't have as much savings as they would want to. For employees, it's great. For employers, it's a great benefit to be able to distribute to their organization as well. I mean, it's interesting. How many of those, from a COVID perspective, how many of those things do you think we're gonna see remaining? Because I mean, what we're finding with obviously, Goldman Sachs have come out and said, nope, we want you back in the office, and we're going to move to that model. Do you think lots more of these sort of almost the new rules that have happened through COVID will really, really stick?
I mean, listen, you're the former consultant, so I'm assuming you have all the answers, plus a lot of sneakers I see back there. Anyways.
Well, I've got lots of sneakers. I'm not sure about all the answers, but.
Okay, well, all right, good. Better to have a lot of sneakers than a lot of answers, I think. I think that is the big question. But it is very clear to me that some of these will stick. And I think it's and I think you said it perfectly, this is not just the restaurant worker or the hotel maid or the secretary. It's all levels. People have seen a way to work and get paid and believe on their end that they're effective. In some cases they are, some cases they may not be. And they don't understand why that can't continue to be the norm. I'm not saying everybody, but certainly certain elements of the population. And I think that concept of how do I balance work from home and be in the office, that's with us forever.
Yeah.
It's gone. The idea that I'm an employer and David, you sit in your studio and you're there every single day and you're going to interview everybody from 9 to 5 and then you can go home, and maybe if you're hourly, we'll pay you overtime if we need you to do another nudnik like Brian Radin. But other than that, that's it. You're saying, you know what? I get up at like 9:30. I like a coffee. Then I want to take a run. And then I've got to make sure that my kids are off to school. And now I'm going to sit down and work. And then I can work till 6 or 7 because my husband comes home, for example, picks up the kids, and I'm still working. Well, I like that. The company may not like that, whether it's, the CEO of Morgan said, if you can go to a restaurant in New York, you can go to the office. And so I also think that's true too, in that this has become an environment where if you're working from home, you better do a damn good job.
Sure. Because
you don't have the day-to-day interaction and supervision and conversation that helps you work through your job and be evaluated and get a little more of the leeway around what you're doing. And secondly, and you said it too, is the disconnect among people. I mean, it's great that we're having this nice conversation. I'd much rather be sitting there with your sneakers because it's just a lot more fun and engaging, and I can see more, you can hear more. It's the same thing with workers and the people that are managing them. It's very difficult to do that and have access to that. I've probably done more coaching and development of people walking in an office and working with people or getting people together as a group than I can doing by Zoom. It's functional. It works. I think our business has done a very good job supporting our clients. But again, remember, our clients were also very dysfunctional during this time. So the world has, remember, providers were somewhat dysfunctional, and so were their customers. Let's see what happens when providers and customers have to be fully functional again. I think that will be an interesting challenge for people like us, service providers, technology providers. But I think that's the one that we will struggle with. And going back to what we do, you've got to find ways to keep those people engaged and incent them to want to work for you first, because if they don't work for you, it doesn't really matter anymore. And then 2, how do you create a balance between an environment that brings the best out of your employees versus their own desire to do whatever they want, which sometimes is inconsistent with the strategy of the business.
Absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've said to the team at 11FS a lot, and I've said this publicly a lot, been really productive for the last 18 months, just hasn't been as fun, and actually, people bring that energy, people bring that fun to these things. And I think actually different experience levels will be impacted in different ways, because I mean, most of what I remember learning when I was just starting out in my career was actually watching other people interact with one another and the ways in which they did things. It wasn't just hearing the words, it was seeing how they did it. And actually, I fear a lot of, I think earlier on, people in their career are probably missing out on a lot of those sort of nuances between, great behaviors and good behaviors. But I'm afraid we're rapidly running out of time though, Brian. I think I could probably talk to you for hours on this subject matter. 2 things I'd like to pick up before we finish. Sure. Where do you see Fintus going next? Because obviously, as you say, there's one problem that you can solve there, and there's lots of things that you can kind of bring on it. But what do you think is the the next opportunity or the biggest opportunity that you've got as to continue sort of growing that in that direction? Because all the things that you've talked about there, there's problems that still need solving, aren't there?
Yes, and our little slice of the world will go after some of those problems. I think some of them are as you said, they could be hours of conversation about. But I think for us, we're continually trying to drive new applications, both for our customers, the enterprises, and their employees. I think we try to have our mission in mind all the time, which is helping workers become more financially secure. Maybe that's a bit hackneyed or trite, but it's true. I mean, that's really what we do. We try to make money. We're a for-profit company. But I think in the way that we do it and how we do it, we always try to keep that in the back of our mind. So that's going to come in new forms of investment type applications, things that can help people be more educated on saving. I mean, even saving a little bit, even saving a couple of bucks out of the earned wage access or saving a couple of bucks out of your paychecks. How do I do it? How do I make it easy? How do I get more information about of saving? Trying to expand some of the capabilities of our Fintus on-demand solution. There's some other things that we see that can help people not only get their money for the things they need, but maybe get their money when they're in environments like in the restaurant where they're getting their tips, and some of that money they can use right away as well, which has some issues today that we think we can help solve with it. Education's, as I said, very important. And then for our clients, more seamless integrations into our applications. So the world is all APIs, and we're still, along with a lot of companies in the financial services industry, providing a lot of batch technology. And in some cases that makes sense, but we're trying to help our employers be more seamless. We think we have solutions. Sometimes we have to bring them along kicking and screaming a little bit because they've got other priorities as well. And I think finally, we're U.S. based today, but we've begun or have been looking at an international product, both on the pay card side and earned wage access, which does have some providers, particularly in the UK and some parts of Europe. It's a more of a worldwide phenomenon now. The other day I counted almost 100 different companies claiming to provide earned wage access, and I would say more than half were outside the United States and very country specific. You know, whether it's Saudi Arabia or South Africa, they're one country kind of product. So we're thinking if we can take and leverage our investment and use that across different countries, because in the end, the core need is the same, whether I'm sitting in London, New York, or in Dubai.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think tying everything back to that purpose as well, it's it gives it meaning, and often, I mean, purposes like that are great to hinge what you are doing, but also it's a good blocker for things that you decide not to as well, which is good. The thing I want to end on, I mean, your career and being an entrepreneur and working in big businesses, being an investor, it's always good to kind of look back at, well, what would be the advice you'd give your younger self? Because I mean, we always, I think as people starting out, they always give themselves a lot harder time than necessarily they think they should do on reflection a couple of years down the line. But what would be the advice you'd give to your younger self, Brian?
Yeah, I think it's probably lead by example. I've never asked a teammate or an employee to do something that I wouldn't have done. And I try to lead by example. I think that's really important. People are the hardest part of any business, whether it's my startups, whether it's working in this business, because they're just not machines. I mean, they act and respond quite a bit by emotion, not logic. We'd like people to be logical. We talk about, artificial intelligence, how it's taking over businesses. And I think there's clearly trends that way for sure. And it's been going on for a long time, but we're still a human capital dominated culture. We haven't quite gotten to the Jetsons, remember the former old cartoon here. So I think it's really important. And it's one of the toughest lessons I've learned over the years. So looking back, there have been times where dealing with individuals that I liked, contributed to businesses that I knew probably changes needed to be made, and I didn't. So my counsel to myself would be to take that action, no matter how hard it would be. Otherwise, you may suffer negative consequences down the line, and it's something that I continue to deal with on a daily basis, because there's people that contribute, there's people that are really good at what they do, but sometimes they're not the right fit for your organization or in the right role. And making that change, you feel like kind of a bad guy, but in some ways it's probably the best thing to do for you in the business, and often for that individual. Something that's hard to learn, and probably at the beginning of my career, it was something I probably should have taken to heart a bit more, particularly in some of my early stage companies, than I've learned over the years.
Yeah, it's a difficult lesson. Often you don't learn it until you go through it, do you, on that one, unfortunately? But it's definitely something to look back on. All right, guys, I'm afraid that's all the time we have, though. Again, Brian, I think we could spend a few more hours sort of unpacking all these different bits and bobs, but we haven't sadly run out of time. Thank you so much for joining me. Where can people learn a little bit more about you and all the good things that you're getting up to?
Sure. Probably the best place is our website, which is fintwistsolutions.com. I post quite a bit on LinkedIn, and I have a Twitter account is at Radin Brian, which in the world of Twitter these days, I try to use not that frequently, but enough when there's important things going on, like this spotlight interview today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time. And for us, make sure you head over to LinkedIn or Twitter. You can just follow us over if you search for 11FS. And make sure if you head over to the 11FS YouTube channel, if you subscribe there, you'll never miss one of these episodes again. Thank you very much for your time again, Brian. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning into this. Goodbye, everybody.